Hi, Tom Anderson, day 51 of 100 Days of Thankfulness. Today I'm talking about the importance of sacrifice, as well as why I'm so thankful for Jim Elliot. So, on the topic of sacrifice, there's this joke, and I've read several different versions of it, and it's along the lines of, I've read some versions where there's 5 people in a plane that's about to crash, and there's only 4 parachutes. Some of the versions I read, there's only 3 parachutes and there's 4 people, but so there's always one person who has to go down with the plane. And the joke usually ends, where the last 2 guys are, saying, well, which one of us is going to take the parachute? And then they say, oh, relax, this, smartest guy in the world just, jumped out with my, my backpack. So, and there's different versions of that I've read. So I realize I'm horrible at telling jokes, but the point that I'm trying to make is if you were that person in the plane and you had to decide as a group, who's going to have to go down, who's going to go down with the plane and who's going to jump with a parachute. For me, I know, that my assurance of salvation is there and through Jesus Christ. So I know beyond the shadow of a doubt I'll end up in heaven. And for everyone else, I don't have so much certainty. So no one really knows exactly how you're going to behave in this situation where you're about to die, but I'd like to believe that I would be the one that would say, you guys go, I'm going to go down with the plane. And that's what sacrifice is. Sacrifice is recognizing that as precious as life is, there's something that's far more precious than our lives, and that is that eternity. And it's that, especially that eternity in heaven with God. So there's all this, stuff on the news about ISIS, and this is creating a lot of fear and anger among Christians to hear about how their brothers and sisters in Christ are dying as a result. Now that's only part of the story. There's something that isn't told in these news broadcasts, and that's what God is actually doing in these situations. It's not like He's just taking a back seat and staying completely out of it. What has always happened throughout history, whenever there's been persecution of the church, has always been with those sacrifices. More and more people come to know Jesus as a result. A lot of it is, you think about the apostles and these men who could have had their lives spared if they had just, denied Christ, but because they were unwilling to do that, their faith was so strong that ended up leading to other people believing as well. Which, in the grand scheme of things, is far more important than any individual life. That being said, I'm certainly not saying, boy, I hope this ISIS thing goes on forever. I actually pray and I hope that this will, come to a conclusion and that the killing will stop. But I'm so thankful to hear about what's actually happening over there through other channels. One of those channels is the Voice of the Martyrs. They have a radio network, and actually I'll provide a link. It's a 28-minute audio link that's explaining what's actually going on, that the stories that we're not hearing over there from those Christians that are in the midst of ISIS. Voice of the Martyrs, actually I got this t-shirt from them. So this t-shirt says, his t-shirt is illegal in 53 countries. There's 53 countries in the world where Christianity is illegal. So it's not like this persecution of Christianity has just started. It's always been happening. There's never been a time where it hasn't been happening. So I'll provide that link, and that should shed some insight on this. But about Jim Elliot. Now, Jim Elliot, him and 4 other missionaries. There were a group of 5 men that were trying to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ to some natives in Ecuador. And this was in the mid-50s that they were doing this. Now, this particular tribe that lived in the jungle was completely isolated and completely out of touch with the rest of the world. And anyone who had gone into the jungle to try to make contact with them was killed. And they knew this before they approached them, so they took certain precautions, and they spent several weeks actually flying over the village and giving them gifts every time they flew over, just to promote that goodwill. And that was effective to a point. I mean, they were able to actually land a ways from the village and, able to converse, a little bit with some of, they didn't speak the language, but they knew some words from someone that had escaped the village, that, so they were learning the language. But, so they ended up getting to know some people from some of their earlier visits. But there was a point where some of the villagers got nervous, and they were thinking that they were being deceived with all these gifts. And so they decided to do a preemptive strike and just kill the missionaries so as to not be tricked in that way. Now, after they speared all the missionaries and killed them, including killing Jim Elliot, they realized that all these men, or many of them anyways, had guns on them, and yet none of them drew their guns, none of them tried to defend themselves. And that had this huge impact on them realizing, wow, these people who kept saying that they were, because what they kept saying is, we are your friends, in their native language. They knew that much to, how to say that. So then they realized, wow, we did kill our friends here, and they came to know Christ as a result. The whole village came to know the Lord as a result of that sacrifice. Now that might seem like, wow, that's pretty extreme, Tom. But if you think about Jim Elliot's words, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And we think about things from that eternal perspective that I was talking about yesterday, then it makes perfect sense. So with that, I just want to thank Jim Elliot.